Hi, welcome to Relational Ground. I'm Dominic Shattuck, and I have a guest with me today who's a little different from my earlier guest, somebody I know pretty well. I know his family really well and him over the last, I guess like 20 something years. And so my friend Karl Whitney, who's down in Durham, North Carolina. Welcome, Karl. And as you know, I'm going to be asking you a little bit about yourself. I'll ask a question about an influential individual in your life, an institution or an organization that's been influential in your life, how you experience the outside world and nature and what it means to you. And then we'll give a moment as to like what's exciting or what you're excited about in this moment. But I want to welcome you. Welcome, Karl. And
Thank you.
yeah, before we start, like maybe talk a little bit about how do we know each other, Karl, in your words? Because I have my own.
Yeah, it's a little convoluted. The main thing is that we both kind of became adults in Durham at the same time.
Yeah.
I arrived in Durham as a child, a 20-something man child, to go to grad school, and we just kind of ended up tangled up in the same social circles coming out of grad school at Duke. Yeah. And I've known you for probably 25 years. One of my oldest friends at this point.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be on your podcast.
Yeah, and you and your family come up to DC, and we go to your house in Durham, and you know it's I love you very much, Karl. I'm really happy you're here today.
Likewise.
And yeah, it's really one of my favorite relationships. I've never asked these questions to you, so these are like questions that I mean I've even experienced some of these things with you, like outside, and like we just did a big hike a couple weeks ago, and that type of stuff. But I've never really asked you like, you know, I know about your family, I know about your parents and your brother and where you grew up and that kind of thing. But I've never really asked you these kind of in a formal way, the kind of questions about important people or organizations. And I'm really curious to hear your perspective on that. But before we get to that, tell in your own words, describe who you are.
Okay, yeah. So and this isn't like no order of importance, right?
Yeah.
I'm a parent, a devoted parent, committed husband to my relationship, a scientist, engaged citizen. I'll say, kind of drives what I do a lot of the time.
And then maybe some of that will come out in the conversation as we move forward. Um, and so let's kind of jump right in. And so that first question is about like I'm curious to hear like who's the one individual you kind of thought about as super influential in as to who you are today and kind of the way I mean, you get out of bed every day. What kind of individual? Who is that individual that kind of pushes you and you think about as shaping your life and having shaped your life?
Yeah,
for years.
I narrowed it down to two people, not one.
Okay. That's okay.
And it kind of falls out into the before moving to Durham and after moving to Durham.
Okay.
So who shaped me as a man child and who helped me stop being a man child and become an adult. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And so growing up, without doubt, it was my father.
Uh-huh.
Both my parents are scientists or engineer types, as is my brother. So we're kind of like a super geeky family.
Uh-huh.
And I like to tell, I tell this story. I told it at their 50th wedding anniversary party. He taught me to ask questions. It's okay to probe and ask and wonder about the world,
Mm-hmm.
to, dissect and understand things using whatever tools are at hand. So like, he's the engineer type. He taught me to take stuff apart. He loved model railroads growing up. He imparted that to me. We built model railroad together. He taught me how to wire it. He taught me that like a screwdriver can also be a knife. It can be a hammer. You don't have to like play by the rules for what tools are. You make shit up along the way, right? I hope I can use a.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not gonna beat that out, are you?
No.
And so, I think if you ask 10 people now, like, what's Karl's most prominent feature or his downfall? More than one of them are going to say he asks too many damn questions.
Yeah.
And
I will say, Karl, that skill of yours is one of my. There are moments when I'm like, okay, Karl, enough. But then I'm also like, other times when you're the person I go to in terms of like resolving issues or thinking through problems. And I think that you provide a great lens for me sometimes in that space.
Well, thank you. One of the things I'm learning still, like we're all continuing to mature, right? We're all still men child
Sometimes, yeah,
a bit. And I'm learning that you don't need to know the answer to everything that you might wonder about.
yeah,
That it's okay to stay in that uncomfortable space, that maybe bite your tongue in the conversation, let someone else have their say, even though there's a question burning in your mind. And
hmm
maybe you didn't need to know that. You don't need to know that.
yeah,
You know, and as I'm getting older, right, I'm getting close. Like I'm not. We're both middle age, right? So we have hopefully many years to go. But it's becoming obvious to me that I am going to die not knowing a ton, and that's okay. And so I can pace myself, and I don't have to know everything.
hmm hmm Did you
So
feel like when you're with your dad as a kid, did you feel like, what ways other than the trains, how did he also encourage you to either ask the questions or turn over the stones or kind of dig into some of the
you
topics that you're
know,
interested in?
I can't cite chapter and verse here, but I'm guessing. Like a lot of times, he just took sort of the Socratic method with me. I might say, "Well, I don't understand this," and he'd say, "Well, what do you think about this, or what does this mean to you?" That kind of thing, and just sort of modeled asking questions.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I also knew from what he did day to day in his job, he just kind of like, you know, solve problems, typically mechanical engineering kind of problems. That's what he was specializing in.
Mhm.
By taking stuff apart and wondering and trying to figure things out and just going back to first principles sometimes to make sense of weird things.
I never asked, did your father also teach?
He
I know
did.
doing research, but did he also teach?
Yeah, he so first of all, my parents are famously private, so I know very little about them as people, actually. Kind of interestingly, despite living with them for 18 or 20 years.
Mhm.
But I learned years later that he was on tenure track at MIT and ultimately was not granted tenure, and that was a big blow to his ego.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But he was teaching both before and after that. So he remained sort of like adjunct faculty for many years. And he eventually taught a whole series of classes that were kind of combination engineering and design. And so a lot of the students were MIT, Harvard, and RISD students.
Uh-huh.
And it sounded really interesting. Like they would pair up artists with engineers, and
Yeah.
together they would like design new products from
Yeah.
those two kind of converging lines of thought.
That's really interesting. And it's also
Yeah,
like it pushes the envelope, right? It's kind of like outside of the box thinking. You have people coming from all those different perspectives. And yeah, I like that a lot. I actually have a friend who was uh uh he was focused on contraceptive technologies, and it could have even been the same program. And he would go to MIT once a year. This guy David Sokol down in Durham, actually.
oh, I remember that name.
Yeah, he was the circumcision guy, and then the
Yeah, yeah,
the the vasectomy guy, and all this stuff. He has all these patents and all this stuff. Great researcher, and I think he had a medical degree. I'm pretty sure he has a medical degree as well. But he would go to this event at MIT, and there were all these different thinkers from a variety of walks of life, and they would come up with innovations. And one of those innovations was actually a filter for a woman's breast milk that would filter. I don't know that it ever worked. I have no idea how. He was telling me the story later on, but for a woman who was HIV positive, so that she could breastfeed her child after she had the baby. I have no idea if this really worked or if it was just a concept or what. But yeah,
gosh, yeah,
this was one of the things they were working on through that program that they had attended, which could have overlapped with what your
yeah,
not
possible.
overlap, but could have been a derivative of what your father had worked on at
I'm
MIT.
sure there are overlapping people.
Yeah, probably, right?
Yeah,
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 yeah. So you mentioned there was another person as well. Who might that
yeah.
be?
You know, Annie, my wife. So we've been married for 23 years now, and um, you know, she's taught me a lot about a whole side of, I guess, the whole left side of your brain, the whole different way of living that I never really learned growing up because my parents are scientists,
Uh-huh.
and they were like textbook scientists. They were just
Mhm.
not in touch with their own emotions. They did not teach me how to have an emotional life. I sought um, real human connection outside the home growing up. And as I deepen my relationship with Annie, like she really has helped me, learn to like be comfortable with strong emotions. Like when we first started going out, the fact that there would be arguments was terrifying to me. Terrifying. Just an argument. I'm like, oh God, this relationship is broken. Because my parents never, ever, ever argued in my presence.
Really?
I heard my mom raise her voice once, and it was really like half a sentence, and that was it. It's kind of crazy. She has taught me how to live a more emotionally authentic life.
And so when you think about that in terms of like the day to day, like moments, how does it kind of play out? How do you kind of think about the way in which it benefits you in terms of the being aware or what?
Well, like, okay, so here's a common conversation where I say, like, oh, such and such thing happened today. And growing up, or based on my childhood, I wouldn't expect the answer from her to be, well, what does that mean? And like, how does that impact this, that, and the other things that you do day to day? And she would never, still never, she just doesn't. She doesn't respond that way. She says, well, how does it make you feel? Right? So like, not how does this event affect the larger system of interactions that you exist within as an automaton in this big machine, but what's going on inside you? Right. And, so often I'm like, I don't know. Let me think about it.
Sometimes I find myself just in the emotional side of things. Other times I find myself just in like the analytic side of things, and kind of finding a way to blend those two sides of issues or sides of a topic is really important, because you realize you can't move forward with some of the analytical stuff if you don't kind of figure out what that emotion and the way you're reacting to it, or the feelings kind of come into play, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it plays out daily in my parenting experience with Jonah, my son. And this inevitably is going to be a big part of our conversation, because like what goes on in my life? Well, parenting Jonah. Yeah. Jonah with all of his developmental special needs. My instinct from day one as a parent was to solve problems. And, I think really, honestly, so he's 21, right? Honestly, only in the past year or two, with the help of a wonderful therapist and then Annie backstopping this, have I been able to accept that there's an emotional component to parenting a kid who's different. A kid who's not textbook son. Like, we don't have a father-son relationship like most parents, like most fathers. Yeah. There ain't no football throwing in the backyard, right? Not that I ever did that with my dad either. There's no joint study of calculus with my son.
Yeah.
And so there's an emotional piece around mismatch with common images or standards for parental experiences. Yeah. But then there's also like just the daily stress. Like, he's a difficult person to live with.
He's a very demanding child to manage in terms of your day to day, I can imagine.
Yeah. Talk about man-child. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he's big and muscular and opinionated.
And also very loving, like we love you guys come up here. I love like the last time you came up to the house. I'll tell you, one of my favorite moments was singing Tom Petty songs with Jonah in the in the car, and he knew all the words to the Tom Petty songs. And yeah, honestly, one of my favorite Jonah moments, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and he definitely models living an emotional life. Like, there's never any doubt of what he's feeling and how he's feeling and how things impact him. In part because he has a difficult time putting things in the words, so it's all body language and it's very clear.
Yeah. And so just sometimes like you experience the emotions of him, and that kind of triggers emotions in you, plus you also have to kind of manage the moment and kind of moving things forward, or getting dinner on the table, or like doing the, managing whatever, getting him where he needs to be, or getting your own things done in that time period too, I imagine.
Well, yeah, but then also another thing that I'm some of this sounds so Psych 101, like, damn, man, I should have learned this like 20 years ago, but the immediate antecedent event that may have stressed me out. Maybe it was a work thing.
Mm-hmm.
And leaves an emotional residue that can impact or even totally dominate how I interact with Jonah
Yeah.
the next moment after. And understanding that like the whole bucket metaphor, you've got a bucket, right? And it can be drained or filled, and it can be drained by multiple different sources.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's point one. But point two, that like the tenor of an emotional stance from some non-child related event can affect how you see the child in that moment, which then drives your emotional and physical reaction to whatever the kid might be doing.
Yeah.
It's like totally unfair to him. Like if I've had a hard day, I'm just not patient with him. Okay, that's pretty obvious to say, but it's super hard to remember that in the moment for someone like me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah. And so from with Annie, like kind of being more aware of the emotional component is what you're saying is kind of made you, I don't know, would you say more present in the, or how would you phrase it?
certainly more present, but also just more aware. It's like taking off sunglasses or turning on the color on your TV. You're like, oh my God, there's all this other shit here to perceive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's, what's the right way to put it? It's like b- gaining these skills to navigate a world that everyone else seems to be have already been doing this for a long time.
Well, don't feel like you're behind because I will tell you that everybody, we are all managing that same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because there's like you mentioned, like your parents were very analytical, very kind of like not probably never talked about those elements, emotional elements of, you know, you know, being in a relationship or, managing or working with your friends or what have you. But it's also a very masculine thing, right? So like the idea that, okay, we got to tick the box, solve the problem, move on to the next thing, and kind of be the man who's providing, or solutions oriented. And the solutions sometimes are so much more than just you know ticking the box. It's like sitting in a discomfort sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's kind of like you know helping somebody through an emotional moment, or trying to figure out you know what that um what that meant to you, that something had happened, and kind of processing all of that. And yeah, and even though you might even know that, you may know that, you know, intellectually, enacting it and taking the moment to actually process it is a whole other thing, right?
A
So
whole other thing. And especially like if you're in the middle of a strong emotion, it's very easy to kind of forget
yeah.
that you are literally experiencing an emotion, and then your opportunity to take a beat and respond instead of simply just reacting automatically, that's out the window if you don't catch it before that happens, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's like another daily challenge with life here.
Yeah. 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 You just want to say, fuck all this shit.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Those feelings come for sure. For sure.
And that there's sort of like a standard or like traditional masculine kinds of behaviors. And it's so true. You're right. And I can't say necessarily that I just sort of picked it up from my dad, because I think both my parents were cut from the same cloth. It was, what you're referring to also is obviously just out there in societal norms.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the things that I'm working on now and learning is that in many instances, ticking a box and nominally getting something done is actually not progress. Sometimes literally not doing the thing in this moment is more productive.
Hmm.
It's paradoxical.
Hmm. And kind of like, what are you saying? Like sitting with it being undone, or what do you mean by that
Yeah.
exactly?
I mean, too, then let's just say like you're in the flow of a conversation with someone, you've got all these ideas you want to talk about in sidebars. Well, it may be better for the conversation to actually say nothing for a while, right?
Hmm.
Maybe it may be better for the relationship to let the other person talk for a while, right?
Well,
But also, like if there's some opportunity to like tick something off a to-do list, maybe it's better not to be done right now because you need to sit and relax, or you need to sit and process something, and you're better off in the long run for doing that first, and then maybe like later coming back to do that ticky-tack thing on your to-do list, or maybe it never needed to be done in the first place.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a matter of reprioritizing.
Yeah. We have a mutual friend who loves her checklists.
Yes.
And I think about how the checklist can kind of become like it's not even necessarily a crutch. It becomes almost like an avoidance mechanism, right? Or a tool, not necessarily for her, but for me
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
in certain contexts. Yeah.
Yeah. Or it's a way to bring order out of a sense of chaos or lack of control, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, yeah. I mean, so I'm currently in between jobs, and there's a lot of stuff I could be doing around the house, but I'm not. I'm reading like a self-help book. I'm doing long walks in the woods.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
These are just sort of me focused, not to-do list item focused. And that's intentional. Yeah, I don't want to overload my days with the appearance of productivity, because that can be exhausting also. And this is like a very rare opportunity to have some time in between jobs. I've got my severance to kind of bridge the gap. Like, this is a good time.
Hmm. Yeah, and also like as you know, I've gone through a pretty much huge job overhaul in the last 12 months, or roughly 10 months or so. And I I I got to a point where I stopped applying for jobs. I was just like, I can't take a no or like a
Yes.
non-response anymore. Or I can't, like, the emotional component of all of it became too much where I was just like done. And now maybe I see a job now and again and I'm like, okay, this is gonna get me off the couch for a minute, and that kind of thing. And I've created other work, but like it's definitely a case of um, just figuring out like how to manage the emotions of that whole job search process. And
Mm-hmm.
every person you talk to becomes like an emotional roller coaster. You get all amped up for it and that kind of thing. And then where do you go
Yeah,
from?
I mean, to be honest, I am interviewing right now, and I've already started to get ghosted by people who said literally, I will not ghost you. I'll get back with you in one day, 2 days max.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah, you can't really attribute, you got to separate yourself from those instances as well. So
It's a
yeah.
meat market. It's just like any other kind of Tinder or Bumble or whatever. It's someone swiped left. I don't even know which one's the right way. Swipe left or swipe right, whatever.
Either. We kind of missed the whole online dating element. So
Yes, fortunately.
yeah, I only read about it and its impact on relationships. So I don't really know how it works, but yeah, I definitely am glad I wasn't part of that. So kind of transitioning this to like we talk about your dad and Annie and how that kind of plays out in awareness of your own emotions and things and how that kind of shapes you now and kind of moving you, you're very analytical. You're also trying to work on these emotional elements and being more aware and how you show up in situations. And I'm curious because I know a bit of your history and the groups you've been a part of in your life, but the question around like institutions or groups or you know, things you've been a part of that have kind of shaped you and how you view the world. I'm curious to hear what you would identify as like one or two of the most important ones when you
Yeah.
think about yourself. Yeah.
Um, you know, I intentionally use the present tense of the verb to be when I talk about I am a Boy Scout. I am an Eagle Scout. Not I was. Like, it is a lifelong imprint that it's put on me. So without a doubt, like, Boy Scouts is one of the things that pops to mind. I was in scouting for, you know 15 years or something of my childhood, and it was just like a big part of the social scene in my neighborhood, and then growing up, and it was very aligned with what seemed to make sense to me.
Hmm.
I cannot disentangle, like, so my parents, in many scout troops, like, the fathers are involved,
Yeah.
or maybe nowadays the mothers too. Uh, my dad never participated, and
Okay.
I think he just, it was not like, there's no resentment in my saying that. It was just
Yeah, yeah.
wasn't for him. And I probably would have felt uncomfortable if he was there because he did not fit in with the other fathers. He was like, which one of these does not belong? We grew up in a working class area of outside Boston, in Arlington,
Mm-hmm.
probably really shishi now. At the time, it was a different kind of community.
Yeah.
And so my dad, being sort of professorial scientist type, he never had anything to say to those dads. The troop met in the church right next door.
To your house.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so
So you didn't even need a ride. So
no, no, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But so like, what I was going to say is like disentangling. Like when I was growing up, my parents both had full time jobs, and they found a woman 2 streets over to babysit my brother and me in the afternoons. And she had 2 kids that were the same age as me and my brother, and I'm still very good friends with the child the boy. There was a boy and a girl. The girl 2 years older, so she's the one that was age matched with my brother. The younger guy, AJ, who you may remember from our
yeah.
wedding and all this, still, connected with him all these years later.
I didn't know
His,
that's where AJ came from.
yeah, yeah.
Nice.
Um, so his family is pretty devout Catholic, and she had no qualms about laying Catholicism on me, even though she knew that my family was not not remotely Catholic. We're a mixed family of Protestant and Jewish. Um, and so I think it's fair to say that I picked up from her, or like the sort of, ether around her family, and she has like 6 sisters, so there are always like these really big family parties, and I was always invited to them. It was great. So they're like a second family to me. And that's where I saw and learned and experienced like emotionally rich family relationships, not in my house, but with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I realized, or just intuitively understood, there was like other families work differently.
Uh-huh.
Um, but their family, or particularly her, she was very vocal about sharing like value system stuff, right? I think some people call it like, Catholic guilt. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot about like duty and honor, obligation to the community, what's right and what's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
not from my family, but from their family. And that like totally fits hand in glove with some of the ways that people experience the Boy Scouts, including me. That it was a way of living. There was a mentality, like the Scout law and the oath. I still know those things by heart.
Uh-huh.
And they're sort of like a long list of positive attributes, like trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind,
Yeah.
cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, reverent. And that's what I expect of myself, and really kind of indirectly and maybe subconsciously expect of others. So those two things, I think, combine like the Catholic Church way of living, as I understood it as a non-Catholic, combined with the flavor of Boy Scouts that I experienced,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
which was, I mean, I loved those times. Like getting away from my family, first of all, so awesome. We
Yeah.
go camping and stuff. All the fathers are like getting drunk. We were like running wild. It was the best. It wasn't, as I understand scouting to be today, it's a little bit more uptight. Clearly, there's been a few issues that have happened in the intervening decades,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But it's had, and the changes are necessary, right? But now it's a very different feel. It's much more lawyered up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I was growing up, it was more like, you know, kids in the wild. It was great.
Yeah. So I was never a member of the Scouts, but I did grow up very Catholic. So
Yeah.
come back to the Catholic thing in a second.
Okay.
So in the Scouts, did you feel like, because and what I understand of the Scouts, so tell me if my perception is wrong, like they're very like kind of goal oriented, right? So you kind of go through the different, you, and sorry if I'm oversimplifying this, but you
Yeah.
work toward getting a badge, or you work toward the different goals that they kind of lay before you. And also like I think it might be even a nice blend between the analytical side of your experiences as a young person and the kind of emotional side of kind of being working within the group and kind of the interactions and those kind of being within that group of kids. And did it
Yeah.
kind of fall in that way for you, or how did
Yeah,
it?
I think your characterization is mostly on the money. There are ranks, and then there were achievements along the way within ranks. So like merit badges, right?
Yeah,
And the ranking, from like Cub Scout on up to Eagle Scout, um, was a mixture of having achieved certain milestones. Maybe duration, age was a criterion. There were a lot of soft skills evaluations, and then the merit badge thing, right? And the soft skills, I think, are like lifelong valuable skills about leadership and group work, tolerating people who are different, motivating in an environment where there's not a strict command and control
yeah.
hierarchy. A
Hmm.
lot of really useful skills, like for the office or whatever. I don't, I wouldn't characterize those years as like emotionally rich. It was like fun,
Yeah,
you
well,
know.
which is emotionally rich, right? In the sense that you get to experience life with these other kids and with these adults in this relatively say, I mean, I don't know how much supervision you got. Didn't sound like all that much, but like enough to keep you alive. And
Yeah,
one of the things that I will mention is that the impetus behind this podcast is tangentially related to the Boy Scouts in the sense that there was a there was the work of Robert Putnam. You know Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone. It was a book
oh yeah, 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 yep,
here, like in the '90s. We're in college, maybe,
yeah,
and the loss of third spaces. And in
sure,
between then and now, I was on a panel with a guy who I might even mention this to you before. Like, I was on a panel with a guy named Pete Davis, I think his name was, and he created a documentary called Join or Die. And it was
right.
basically, yeah, how people have kind of gone into third spaces now and kind of building their own community and kind of building that up and on the basis that like Robert Putnam's research was all saying, you know, communities that had more civic engagement or communities where there were more third places or more third spaces and people were actually spending time together and kind of overcoming differences. How this relates to the Boy Scouts is the Boy Scouts were actually the, you can correct me if I'm misrepresenting this, but they were actually developed as a way in which to take kids off the street and to keep them busy while their parents were at work in the early 1900s. Are you familiar with that?
No,
It kind of came out in an essay that was written by Robert Putnam and Richard Reeves, who's the head of AIBM that I'm affiliated with.
yeah, I don't know. I certainly have not heard that. It's definitely possible. Don't forget that the Scouts was originated in the UK,
Right.
and I don't know if there was a sort of like a mixture of motivations in bringing it to the US. One of that possibly being what you're talking about. But I seem to recall that part of it also was an awareness. Um, and boy, what the hell do I know about history? I can't remember if this was connected to the Civil War or World War One, but an awareness that young men were not physically fit enough,
Mm-hmm.
and they were too coddled, too interior, like indoors,
Yeah.
and not enough. Having gone through the Industrial Revolution or whatever, people becoming predominantly city based and no longer rural based, just didn't have the skills that it took to survive
Right.
in the rough and tumble, including in war.
Yeah.
And so there's inherently like a semi-fascist or militaristic component to the origins of the Boy Scouts about getting young men ready to be good soldiers and good leaders in
Right.
war.
Yeah, I think in that piece they talk about that a little bit, and they also talk about other groups that came out, like the Boys and Girls Club. I think it was just the Boys Club. The YMCA was another group that came out in the early 1900s to give young people a place to be rather than being free and wild on the streets.
Yeah,
And so having whether it be a formal institution or some kind of a place to congregate, I think is critical. And I wanted to create this podcast because I do feel like we're seeing more third spaces being created. We see men's groups, we see women's groups being created. There, I live in DC, and like if you ever go to the mall or the fields around the mall in the summertime, there are people playing volleyball and kickball and soccer and football and all sorts of sports on those fields almost every night. It's like a really nice way
Yeah.
for people to congregate and get together and get a little sweaty and maybe go have a beer after or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the point is like, um, I also felt like we needed examples of these things, right? So like your example of the
Yeah.
Boy Scouts is a good one and very, very salient to the purpose of the podcast because it's like it was this institution that you were part of that really did shape who you are and how you see the world and that kind of thing. So yeah, and I really aligned with, I wasn't what I was intending for. I didn't know what you were going to say. I didn't know if you were going
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
the lab at Duke or the
I got out of the line as soon as I could.
or
Oh my,
Freddie's living room.
right. Right.
Talk about Freddie's living room and watching all those basketball games in there
Yeah. Yeah.
that always denigrated into like people being too drunk or something else. So,
Yeah. Right. Right.
um, so yeah, I think that that's really interesting. And I'm sure people will relate to that experience you had with Scouts. Was
Yeah.
that
I'll
the
just say one of the things is
South
like,
America or something?
yeah. Yeah. It was always called Boy Scouts USA.
All right. Yeah. So,
Um,
like, I'm curious. Do you want me to move on, or do you want to stick around
I
and
was just gonna. I was just gonna say one last thing about the Boy Scouts, which is that regarding like the whole notion that it's maybe militaristic, maybe it's designed to create individuals that work well in a structured environment like the army, and also that it's instilling um, pro-social norms. I was aware. I felt all those things growing up, like in the Scouts. I'm like, yeah, it was a little bit, hokey. That's why it was so important to me that my particular troop was pretty cool
uh-huh.
because there were other troops that were so uptight, and so into the whole, checking to make
Uh-huh.
this thing here called the gig line, the line between your buttons on your button down shirt and the zipper on your shorts have to be aligned. Well, if you're out of alignment, you're sloppy and you're at
Uh-huh.
odds with the Boy Scout, ethic. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
it a rest. So I knew that there was this whole other sort of excessive side, maybe even a dark history, but still the benefit to me of having a third space like you're calling, in a community, an accepting community, a place that was not driven by scientific inquiry all the damn time was key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. It's a great experience to have teams and places and groups you can be a part of that mix it up. I know there's several different groups for me, and um, a lot of them centered around sports. Like different teams that I was a part of, um, and mostly because they just kind of like that was I don't, that's I always kind of gravitated to that to sports and athletics because it was acceptable within my kind of social circle and my family. It was they knew what it took to go to practice and that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
so it was relatable in a way, and it was also the example that I was given. I wasn't No one was talking about physics in my house, Carl.
Yeah. I get it.
Nobody. I knew that's and unfortunately so, because I had to learn that there actually was a thing called physics, and then that I didn't wanna take that class in college.
Well, the apple sometimes does not fall close to the tree. Like I had the hardest time on calculus in high school, and I only did like the first half of your typical thing, and I avoided all math through college. I was like, nope, not going in near any of that stuff.
Really? You
Yeah,
didn't have
yeah,
to take some math for what do you biology in undergraduate?
yeah. Psychology major. I took, you know, maybe I took like an econ class to satisfy the math requirement. I forget exactly.
Okay. Yeah,
I
you
know I
gotta
took
get around it sometimes.
I took the physics for poets version of physics senior year in college, which was really simplified,
Yeah.
like almost no math.
You wrote poems about formulas like sigma,
Yeah. Oh,
sigma.
it wasn't for poets. It was for like the football team,
Uh-huh.
and it was just right for me.
Excellent. Excellent. So the scouts and the, kind of, I know you just moved into a new house and it's got a
Yeah,
bit of a different shift to you in terms of location and proximity to downtown kind of things. You're not really that much further. You're just in a different part of Durham.
yeah.
But the the scouts put you outside, the camping, the kind of outdoor wilderness things that were incorporated in the scouts. And then kind of brings us to the third question, which is around, yeah, like nature and being outside and what does it mean to you now? And you mentioned earlier like walking through the woods and things. And like what does it mean to you? When do you do it? And what do you get out of it on the back end?
Mm, yeah. So every morning I look out our window. This is true in the old house too. Just feel very fortunate, blessed, lucky to be able to live where I live. Again, I grew up in Boston. Like my backyard was a highway, constant sound of city noise. Um,
Uh,
and I don't, looking back on it, it's not like I thrived in the scouts because we went out to the countryside. It was more like this was part of the cool thing about scouts is that there were, you go away for the weekend, get away from the parents.
mm-hmm.
But here, so it's a source of peace, right? So I go outside, I can sit on the deck and hear the birds chirp. It's like very calm. It's very nice. So it's there's like a sensory component that gives me some relaxation. The wind on my face, the sound of the birds, the crunching of leaves underneath my feet. In our new house, we have a little creek at the bottom of the property, so I built a bench. You can sit out there and listen to the water gurgle in the creek. It's great. I mean, it's like my
Uh-huh.
little happy place. I love it.
Nice.
Um, it's very nice. Um, but the other thing I was thinking about this in preps for today, like um, there's this other thing which I'm sure is not unique that I like that I don't get to do this enough. But our hike a couple of weeks ago was kind of
Uh-huh.
tough to do this. I like the again, it's a privilege to be able to flip a switch and kind of put yourself intentionally in a bit of a risky experience. Like you get a map, you get a compass, you see a trailhead, you've got your backpack on, you go backpacking, you're not really, the
Yeah,
likelihood
you're
that
not
you're going to
going
get
out.
eaten by a bear or die is pretty low. But you are like intentionally going into an area less secure. Like there's no electricity, you can't use your phone, right? You're off the grid, you got to make your own
Yeah.
fire. Maybe you get lost. That's what you have the topo map for and the compass. But I view nature then like it's an opportunity to step away from the hyper comfortable or hyper connected world that we live in, right? And
Mm-hmm.
practice a little bit of uncertainty, a little risk, pretty low risk,
Yeah.
like you know,
Yeah.
I'm not going up to rural Alaska to try to survive on trout or something.
No, we wouldn't survive out there.
I would not. No,
Not for long.
no.
Yeah. 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 I'm excited to see the new house and I'm excited to see the bench and the creek. Um the you know it was nice to, the other thing about even today connecting with you, but also like on that hike when you're out away from, no one was pulling out their phone. Nobody was like, there was nobody calling us to kind of get us to go and do something or whatever.
Yeah,
We're just kind of like the four of us were just kind of out in the woods. And yeah, I'll have to be honest, like, and I was struggling on that hike. I
yeah,
completely died. I was garbage on that day. And but there was is such a beautiful hike, and like uh, I wasn't anticipating like crossing those fields.
hmm.
Do you remember how we crossed the fields? And I was like, "Geez, this is awesome."
Oh,
Like that was a great trail.
oh yeah, it's beautiful.
It's a
The rolling hills and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I could have skipped the whole Dragon's Tooth piece climbing up that. I think I would have been better off if I hadn't done that element of it. I'm glad I've done it once. I won't do it the next time. But yeah, it was a great trail. Like
Mhm.
the Appalachian, and we were on a stretch of the Appalachian on that trail. A lot of up and down too. So it was no joke.
It's a good workout. It's yeah, we're lucky to live in the country that I mean, it's a beautiful country, right?
Yeah,
You can go almost anywhere and find a beautiful trail. It's amazing.
yeah. What's what I often have to remind myself about the United States too is that it's a rural country. Like most of this country is not a city.
Hmm.
The physical landscape is you don't have to drive far. I'll never forget the stretch between where you grew up in Massachusetts and where I grew up in Massachusetts. There were towns in between. There weren't too many big cities between Arlington and Fitchburg, but the once you go past Fitchburg, there's Gardner and a couple little towns out there, but you're out in the woods at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah,
It doesn't You don't have to drive more than an hour and 5 minutes or 10 minutes past Boston, outside of Boston, and you're in the woods. And for a lot of America, it's wooded area, and it's just amazing to kind of think about because we often gravitate to the cities. We think of this, I refer to myself being from outside of Boston, which I'm really far outside of Boston.
yeah. You're also outside of Burlington, Vermont, right?
Yeah, pretty much, right?
Or suburban Burlington.
Yeah, yeah. Or Worcester.
Yeah, right, right. I wouldn't admit to that though.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I guess, it's interesting to be talking to you on this too, because these are formal questions. And like,
Yeah,
typically you and I would be bullshitting about this, drinking some kind of beer or something, and then, hanging out and having this conversation. So thanks for your patience with me on this.
of
Um,
course. Oh,
and,
Joe.
is Jonah there?
Yeah, he just got home.
Hey, Jonah.
He says hi.
So, yeah, so I guess the way I've been finishing up these podcasts is around, you know, what are you excited about right now? What's
Yeah.
kind of,
Well, so I'm in between jobs. I mentioned that earlier.
yeah,
So I'm kind of excited about where I'm at right now and sort of seeing what presents itself for me
yeah,
going forward. So I am interviewing for several different. I have like 3 or 4 irons in the fire still.
yeah,
I started off with a little bit more, but a couple of them have naturally withered away. I'm not in any rush to get a job, but what's interesting, and you'll see how this all ties together. The universe is kind of a clever place. As soon as I flipped the switch on LinkedIn, when I knew I was going to lose my job, I started getting contacted by recruiters, and I also did some searches and found a few things that looked like they were good fits for me. Some of these jobs are, if they start off anonymized, like here's a role in a company for, this type of disease, and that's all.
mhm,
And once you sort of like get through the first barrier, then they say who the company is and what kind of job it is, maybe even what their salary range is and so on.
yeah,
Well, through that process, coincidentally, like 2 of the 3 irons in the fire right now have clear connections back to Fox P1 and the foundation that I helped start for Jonah's genetic disease. So as you well know, but I'll just sort of fill it in for the
yeah,
podcast, Jonah has a rare neurodevelopmental disorder that's caused by mutations in this gene called FOXP1. So it's a genetic form of autism, not caused by Tylenol.
yeah.
I want to say that out loud. The evidence is overwhelming that this is caused by a genetic mutation.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 years ago or so he was diagnosed about 10 years ago. 5 years or so ago, the little community on Facebook had grown big enough that there was a critical mass to put together a board of directors, and we established, like, bootstrapped up a 501c3 foundation, which now is, poking along, doing pretty well. There's Jonah was number 6 in the world diagnosed, as far as we know, and now there's about 900 people known. So he was very, very early, and hitherto, these people likely have been around forever. This is not a new thing.
Yeah.
It's just the technology now exists to sequence the genome cost
Mhm.
effectively.
These are
Global, yeah, it really is like it's ultra, ultra rare.
Yeah.
But from an isolation perspective, parents dealing with a weird situation that doctors consistently would say, I've never seen someone like Jonah before. Good luck. Don't know what to tell you. That's typically what we got from doctors over and over again for the first 10 years.
Mm.
Going from that to having a name for the syndrome, yet knowing that there's apparently 5 other people in the whole world, it's a pretty isolating feeling. It's pretty terrible as a parent because you're like, what the hell do we do? Doctors can't help us. We don't know what's wrong with him.
Yeah.
But now we have a name. Big deal. Thanks a lot. Well, so now having 900 people, it's still ultra rare in the sense of like drug company interest,
Right.
but it's transformational to have like a global presence. Like we have every other year, we try to meet as a global community, and it's just amazing. The most recent one was last year in outside Amsterdam,
Right.
and we had about 275 people. It was crazy. It was an amazing thing, and like
Yeah.
many of those people are meeting other families for the first time themselves. So there's like tears everywhere. It's crazy. It's wonderful. The whole community thing is so important. And where was I going with this? Oh yeah. So I'm a scientist, right? That's what I do for my day job, or what I did. That's what I did for my day job until last Friday. Yeah, yeah. So I work in drug development. I went to Duke for brain science, and I just stayed here and worked in that field now. And my most recent job was helping run a development program for gene therapy for a form of dementia called frontotemporal dementia. So I know about drug development, and I'm a biology kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
So I naturally gravitated to the science around the syndrome that my son has, and I sort of, in air quotes, in the chair of our science team. But we have come across a couple of interesting companies doing work that's related to FOXP1 syndrome, or maybe they're developing a drug that we think biochemically could help FOXP1 syndrome.
Yeah.
Well, those 2 companies are currently hiring for people like me. So they're 2 of the 3 irons in the fire right now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, how does the world work this way? Well, Annie would say that there are no coincidences. It's sort of the universe nudging you along.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about the possibility of getting back in the game and working in that field in a way that might also kind of feed this other half of my life, which is a leader of this volunteer organization.
Yeah. Yeah. And a parent.
Yeah.
Somebody managing. Yeah.
Yeah.
This condition. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is exciting. And I know it kind of would, really provide you with like a different sense of purpose at the office. And if that were the case, right.
It
And
cuts both ways. Like I got to be careful not to convey that I'm only interested in this company because I might be able to, I don't know, steal a couple bottles of drug off the shelf and give it to my son. Like
right.
they wouldn't want to hear that.
10 years down the road or whatever when they're ready for them, right?
Yeah.
But what it is, it like sense of purpose. I was in a meeting earlier today, and it was focused on this research study I'm involved in Burkina Faso, and they were talking about the behaviors and the responsibilities these men were talking about when it came to like contraceptive use and things like that. And I do a lot of work in that space, and I bring it up because they were focusing on the behaviors in the study, which is not inappropriate. But what they weren't talking about, because this is all qualitative research, right? So it's all interviews and focus group information and transcripts and things. But what they weren't analyzing was kind of like, what is the overall purpose that these men have? How do they see their role as a man or a husband or a partner in this context? And so, we kind of had a conversation around like, yes, those are the behaviors and the responsibilities that they're defining, but like, to if we want to have any sort of a influence in terms of how more equitably they approach contraceptive use and decision making in the home, we really also need to understand the purpose and like having how do they see their role as a man, not just in taking decisions, but if they're taking decisions, to what end, and where does equity and communication and all those other aspects and emotions, like you were talking about earlier, where do those things come into play in those big decisions and family, and having that purpose is I, identifying it and being able to recognize it in your in the way in which you conduct your day, I think is critically important. I will tell you, like, having lost my job at Hopkins last year might have been a really good thing for me because I do feel like working on men's health topics is much more purpose aligned for me
Much more salient, right?
than the work I was doing before. Yeah.
Yeah. I admire you for your resilience, Dom, too, through that process.
There was a lot of bullshitting and swearing, kicking the
Yeah,
wall and shit.
yeah, I know. I can imagine. Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate it, Carl. No, and it's also been nice to process with you and
Mm.
Scott and other friends, Johnny Richard, Boots, those guys, Norbs, all those guys who've been kind of, you know, picking up the phone and just shooting the shit,
Yeah.
checking in, you know. And that's that honestly, like, that element of it all is I can't even I'll stop bawling. Like
Mm.
the people who checked in on me, big time. Yeah. So important, including you, motherfucker.
I I learned from you that it's like again. I'll come back to this thing like no duh. I see my wife doing this all the time, but when I heard you say it, I was like, oh yeah, I could actually check in on somebody. Like, yeah, okay, let me do it.
Yeah, yeah. It's a big deal. It's a big
Yeah,
deal. But Carl, for the I'm just well, can stay on the line after, but for the purpose of the podcast, I'm gonna call it an end right here. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and yeah, I really appreciate you sharing
my
these
pleasure, Don.
aspects of your life, Carl.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great opportunity. Thanks for giving it to me.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
Likewise, likewise.
Thanks, Carl.